Have you ever looked round and realized you don't really have many friends anymore? Not the kind to invite you to every party, every night out, every let's get together and forget our problems. You see their stories, their photos, their noise, and yet somehow you feel completely disconnected, and then that thought creeps in. Does that mean something's wrong with me? It's strange, isn't it? We live in the most connected age in history, and yet so many of us feel unseen, misunderstood, or quietly isolated. The world keeps shouting that popularity equals worth, that the more people you're surrounded by, the more successful you are. But deep down, you can feel it. That's not always true. Sometimes, the fewer people you have around you, the freer you become. But freedom can feel lonely at first, because when you start thinking deeper, setting higher standards, and cutting up noise, people disappear. They call you distant, cold, or too serious. But maybe, just maybe, what looks like loneliness is actually clarity. In this episode, we're going to explore what it really means when you have fewer friends, not from a place of sadness, but through the lens of Stoicism, because Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all faced the same thing, isolation. And instead of fearing it, they learned to use it, to think, to grow, to understand themselves. So stay until the end, because what you'll discover isn't just why you have fewer friends, but why that might be the best thing that ever happened to you. We rarely talk about it, but it's becoming more common. Adults are losing friends, quietly, steadily, and sometimes painfully. Not because they've done something wrong, but because life starts to reveal who actually belongs in a as we get older. Friendships begin to change shape. The ones built on convenience, the party invites, the weekend drinks, the bro, we should hang out texts start to fade. People drift toward different priorities, different values, and suddenly, you find yourself standing in a quieter circle. That silence feels heavy at first. It makes you wonder if you've become distant, too serious, or hard to connect with. But Stoicism gives us a radically different perspective. It doesn't see solitude as a failure of connection. It sees it as the beginning of understanding. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In other words, the people around you eventually shape who you are. So, if you find yourself with fewer friends, maybe it's not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've started protecting your inner color from fading. Today's culture romanticizes constant company, brunch groups, travel buddies, digital circles. But the Stoics remind us, peace isn't found in crowds, it's found in clarity. They believe that friendships should be few, but deeply aligned. Connections that build, not drained. In this episode, we'll explore what the lack of friends really means through the lens of Stoicism. Not as a social problem, but as a philosophical mirror. We'll uncover 7 insights, from high standards and inner peace to the power of meaningful solitude. Each one reveals how having fewer friends doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware, because friendship, in the Stoic sense, isn't about numbers or noise. It's about character, and sometimes, realizing the truth is what finally sets you free. Most people believe that having fewer friends means something is missing in their life. But from the Stoic point of view, it often means the opposite. That something has finally arrived. Wisdom. Because the more you grow, the more selective you become. You stop giving your time, energy, and peace to people who don't respect them. And when you raise your standards, not in arrogance, but in awareness, your circle naturally gets smaller. Imagine this. You used to say yes to every hangout, every drink, every casual get-together. You surrounded yourself with people who made noise but not meaning. They weren't bad people, just not aligned. Then one day, you wake up tired of the constant chatter, the gossip, the empty talk. You start craving quiet, not because you dislike people, but because you finally like yourself. That's the moment your friendships begin to change. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It's the quality of thought that determines the quality of life, and by extension, it's the quality of people you share those thoughts with that determines your peace." When your inner world becomes more disciplined, your outer world adjusts to match it. You no longer tolerate chaos, even if it comes disguised as company. But that's where the misunderstanding begins. When you start saying no, people notice. They'll say you've become distant, antisocial, or too serious. But what they don't understand is this. It's not that you stopped caring. You stopped settling. The Stoics taught that friendship should be rooted in virtue, not utility, not entertainment, not mutual convenience. Seneca described a true friend as another self, someone who makes you better by being near you, someone you can trust with silence, not just conversation. How many people in your life fit that description? Most of us were never taught to ask that question. We were taught to collect people like trophies. The more, the better. But Stoicism flips that logic. The fewer, the truer. Because friendship is not about volume. It's about alignment. Having high standards doesn't mean judging others. It means understanding that your peace is fragile and precious. You can't build stability with people who thrive on chaos. You can't grow in wisdom with those who fear silence. And you can't evolve if your environment keeps rewarding the version of you that you've already outgrown. In today's culture, this lesson feels almost rebellious. We're told that isolation is a red flag, that you must always be social, networked, available. But the Stoic sees it differently. Epictetus said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." That's not elitism. That's emotional intelligence. Because energy is contagious. If you surround yourself with gossip, you'll think smaller. If you surround yourself with ambition, you'll rise naturally. If you surround yourself with wisdom, you will find peace. So yes, as you grow, your circle will shrink. And it's supposed to. That's not loneliness. That's refinement. It's life pruning away what no longer supports your highest self. Still, the world will misread you. They'll call it arrogance when it's actually boundaries. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. Because you've stopped trying to belong everywhere. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You've learned to measure friendship not by duration, but by depth. And maybe that's the greatest sign of maturity. When you'd rather spend a quiet evening alone with your thoughts than a noisy night surrounded by people who don't understand them. The Stoics believed that solitude refines character. And when your character strengthens, your connections follow suit. The right people, ones aligned with your values, will find their way back into your life naturally. Not many, but enough. So if you find yourself with fewer friends these days, don't panic. Don't chase the noise you've already outgrown. Instead, remind yourself, having higher standards isn't isolation, it's evolution. And sometimes, evolution looks like walking alone, until you meet others walking the same way. At some point in your life, you'll realize that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. That realization can feel liberating or terrifying, depending on how well you've learned to be alone. We're taught to treat solitude like a punishment. Don't isolate yourself. Go out more. Find your people. But what if, for a time, solitude isn't a punishment? It's preparation. Because when you strip away all the noise, the opinions, the expectations, the validation, what's left is you. And that's where the Stoics found their true power. Epictetus lived most of his life in modest conditions. He didn't fear being alone because his peace didn't depend on company. It depended on clarity. He wrote, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He understood something most people never learn. When you're truly self-sufficient, loneliness becomes impossible. Loneliness says, "I need someone else to make me whole." But solitude says, "I'm already complete, and I choose who gets access to me." That shift in perspective changes everything. Because when you stop fearing your own company, you start discovering parts of yourself that were buried under distraction. You learn what actually fulfills you, not what society told you should. You find stillness where chaos used to live. You stop trying to fill silence and start listening to it. Modern life makes this harder than ever. Every moment alone feels like an alert waiting to happen. A message, a post, a headline. We fill every gap with digital noise because silence feels like a void. But that's exactly where wisdom grows, in the spaces we refuse to enter. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And one of the greatest wastes is constantly seeking company to avoid confronting ourselves. Because every time we run from solitude, we abandon the chance to understand who we are where no one's watching. Being comfortable alone doesn't mean rejecting people. It means no longer depending on them for balance. It means walking into an empty room and not feeling empty yourself. It means knowing that your peace isn't fragile, that it doesn't break when someone leaves. The Stoics trained for this. They practiced detachment not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. They knew that life is unpredictable. Friends move, relationships end, circumstances change. And if your stability depends on others, you'll always be at the mercy of what leaves. Self-sufficiency isn't isolation. It's strength. It's the quiet confidence that you can lose everything external and still not lose yourself. So the next time you find yourself sitting alone on a Friday night, no plans, no invitations, just you. Don't reach for distraction. Reach inward. Ask yourself, what am I running from? Or what am I ready to meet within me? Because the moment you stop fearing solitude is the moment you start mastering it. And once you do, you'll discover that being alone was never emptiness. It was freedom in disguise. Every relationship costs something: time, energy, attention, emotion. And the older you get, the more you realize not everyone deserves to be paid with those currencies. In your 20s, friendship feels limitless. You say yes to everyone because your energy feels infinite. You give your weekends, your emotional space, your mental clarity, because you believe connection is always worth it. But as you grow, you begin to see what Stoicism has taught for centuries. Anything that drains your peace, even in the name of connection, is too expensive. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." It sounds simple, but it's a radical idea, because when you truly start applying it, you'll lose half the people in your life. Not out of anger, out of awareness. Relationships have invisible costs. Every conversation that leaves you anxious, every friend who turns every talk into gossip, every person you keep out of guilt, not genuine affection. They all take something from you. They tax your clarity, your time, your emotional balance. And the Stoic learns to account for that cost, quietly, without resentment. You can love people deeply and still limit access. You can care for them and still protect your energy. That's not selfish, that's stewardship. Because peace, once lost, is expensive to rebuild. We often talk about loyalty as if it means staying no matter what. But Stoicism redefines loyalty, not as blind endurance, but as mindful consistency. You don't owe endless tolerance to those who constantly disrupt your growth. Loyalty is only noble when it doesn't require self-betrayal. Think of your mind as a home. Would you let anyone walk in, throw their baggage around, and leave the door open? Probably not. So why let people do that to your peace? Epictetus said, "You become what you give your attention to." And attention is the most valuable thing you own. Whoever gets your attention shapes your reality. That's why the Stoics warned, be selective not just with who you talk to, but with who you allow to influence your thoughts. There's a difference between generosity and self-neglect. One strengthens your character, the other weakens it. When you give too much of yourself to relationships that take more than they return, you're not being kind, you're being careless. The Stoic approach is simple. Before you invest in a person, ask, does this relationship make me wiser, calmer, and freer? If the answer is no, then the cost is too high, no matter how familiar it feels, because every moment spent maintaining shallow connections is a moment stolen from the people and pursuits that actually matter. The truth is, most people won't understand this mindset. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you become too calculating. But what they see as calculation is really awareness. You've stopped giving discounts on your energy. You've learned that peace has a price, and you're finally willing to pay it. So don't feel guilty for protecting your time. Don't apologize for your quiet boundaries. The Stoics knew that every wise person eventually learns this truth. You can't buy real connection, but you always pay for a fake ones. At some point, you get tired of performing, tired of pretending to enjoy conversations that drain you, tired of agreeing just to keep the peace, tired of acting like everything's fine when something inside you whispers, "This isn't me." We all wear masks, not out of malice, but out of survival. We learn early that being liked is safer than being real. So we adjust. We laugh at things we don't find funny, not at ideas we don't believe, and hide the parts of ourselves that might not fit in. But the more we perform, the further we drift from who we truly are. Stoicism exposes this illusion for what it is, emotional slavery. Because when your peace depends on pleasing others, you're no longer living. You're auditioning. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He lived by this code even as an emperor surrounded by people who demanded performance. He understood that authenticity isn't arrogance, it's integrity. In modern life, authenticity feels risky. You fear being misunderstood, rejected, or labeled too different. But the Stoics remind us that truth always outlives approval. A moment of discomfort from being honest is still better than a lifetime of pretending. Look round. Most people are exhausted not from work, but from pretending. Pretending to have perfect lives, perfect relationships, perfect control. We've built a culture of performance where everyone is clapping, but no one feels seen. Seneca warned against this centuries ago. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. We imagine rejection so vividly that we reject ourselves first." But real freedom begins when you stop fearing that loss, when you're willing to be disliked for the sake of being genuine. Here's the paradox. The moment you stop performing, you start attracting people who actually fit. Because when you're honest about who you are, you give others permission to do the same. That's the kind of connection Stoicism celebrates, not built on pretense, but on truth. Authenticity simplifies life in a way that nothing else can. You stop wasting energy on appearances. You stop overthinking what people might say. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. It doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you start respecting yourself enough not to lie for comfort. And yes, it comes with losses. Some people will leave when you become real. But that's not a tragedy. That's alignment. You're simply clearing space for those who can meet you where you truly are. So if you feel your circle shrinking as you grow more authentic, don't panic. You're not losing people. You're losing your disguise. And what remains after that is something rare. relationships built on truth, not transaction. Respect earned from honesty, not performance. The Stoic path doesn't demand perfection. It asks for a congruence, that your words, values, and actions line up. Because when you stop performing for others, you finally start performing for life itself. When you start choosing peace, you'll quickly realize how few people are comfortable with it. Because peace doesn't entertain. It doesn't gossip. It doesn't argue just to win. It doesn't dance in chaos. And that's exactly why it's priceless. Most people don't protect their peace. They spend it. They give it away in arguments that don't matter, online debates that go nowhere, and relationships that thrive on emotional turbulence. But the Stoics treated peace like a sacred resource, the fuel for clarity, discipline, and self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That single line could summarize the entire philosophy of inner peace. You can't control the noise, but you can control what gets in. You can't control the chaos, but you can decide how much space it rents inside your head. In modern life, this is harder than ever. We live in a culture that rewards reaction. The loudest voice wins, not the calmest one. Every notification is a spark waiting for your attention to ignite it. But Stoicism teaches restraint, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Peace doesn't mean withdrawal from life. It means participation without contamination. You can be fully engaged with the world and still remain untouched by its madness. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." And he was right. Most chaos dies in silence, not because silence ignores, but because silence clarifies. When you refuse to react, you shift the balance of power. Suddenly, the person who tried to provoke you loses control, and the drama starves without your attention. This is the Stoic paradox. By doing nothing, you achieve everything that matters: peace, dignity, control. Protecting your peace will cost you things. You lose invitations, arguments, even people who mistake calmness for indifference. But that's a small price for sanity, because every moment spent in unnecessary conflict is a withdrawal from your mental bank. Think about it. When was the last time you walked away from an argument and thought, "I feel better now"? Almost never, because peace doesn't survive in the same room as ego. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were emotionally intelligent. They felt deeply, but they refused to be directed by temporary storms. That's the difference between reaction and response, between chaos and control. When you start prioritizing peace, something powerful happens. You stop needing to prove your calmness to others. You stop defending your silence. You stop explaining why you no longer participate in their noise. You just live quietly, firmly, intentionally. And that's when your peace becomes contagious. People begin to notice the way you move differently, slower, steadier, lighter. They sense that nothing easily shakes you anymore, and without saying a word, you become a mirror, a reminder that strength isn't loud. It's composed. So let them call you distant, boring, or detached. Because what they call boring, the Stoic calls balanced. And what they call detached, the Stoic calls free. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not everyone will see your worth, and that their blindness doesn't make you any less valuable. From childhood, we're conditioned to seek validation. A good grade earns approval. A compliment feels like confirmation. And somewhere along the way, we start confusing validation with value. But Stoicism cuts through that illusion with brutal clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." It's a paradox that defines our age. People who can't hear their own thoughts because they're too busy listening for applause. Validation is seductive because it feels like proof. When people praise you, it feels like safety. But the moment that praise fades, so does your confidence. And that's how external approval becomes internal dependence. The Stoics saw this dependence as a subtle form of slavery. Because when your peace depends on someone else's perception, you've handed them the keys to your self-worth. Epictetus warned, if you want to be invincible, then control what depends on you. And opinions, no matter how flattering, don't. The truth is, you can be admired by thousands and still feel empty. Or you can walk alone in silence and feel whole. It all depends on who's holding the mirror. External validation is a mirror that distorts. It shows you not who you are, but what others want to see. Internal validation, self-respect, integrity, discipline, that's the mirror that reveals your real reflection. But here's the paradox most people miss. The less you chase validation, the more respect you attract. Because people sense when you're not performing. They can feel when you don't need their approval. And that quiet confidence draws them in more than any performance ever could. Modern life thrives on validation loops. Social media is built to reward our need to be seen, liked and affirmed. We post, we wait, we refresh, hoping the world echoes back. You matter, but the Stoics remind us, you mattered long before anyone noticed. Seneca said, a wise man is content with his own approval. That line isn't arrogance, it's freedom. It means you've reached a point where your peace doesn't rise and fall with someone else's praise. It means your worth isn't up for a public debate. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something meaningful and didn't tell anyone? When was the last time you succeeded quietly? No post, no announcement, no validation. That feeling right there, that calm satisfaction that needs no audience, that's real power. So stop giving the world the right to measure you. Stop letting strangers decide how valuable your time, your thoughts, or your presence should be. Your worth isn't visible in applause. It's visible in the discipline you keep when no one's watching. And once you understand that, you'll never chase approval again. Because the moment you validate yourself, no one can ever take that away. We've reached the final lesson, and maybe the simplest, yet hardest one to accept. Having fewer friends doesn't mean you've lost something. It means you finally started keeping only what matters. The world glorifies numbers. Followers, contacts, connections. We measure success by volume. How many people know your name? How many messages light up your phone? But Stoicism reminds us, abundance without depth is just noise. Seneca once wrote, one loyal friend is worth more than 1,000 acquaintances. He lived in a time of politics, betrayal, and power struggles, a world not so different from ours. And he understood that trust, like gold, becomes more valuable when it's rare. When you were younger, friendship was about proximity. Who sat next to you in class? Who texted you first? Who shared your hobbies? But as you grow older, proximity matters less, and alignment matters more. You begin to crave conversations that nourish you, not just distract you. People who can sit with your silence, not just your laughter. Those who challenge you to grow, not those who keep you small so they feel big. The Stoics believed that friendship was not about comfort, but about virtue. A true friend, they said, helps you live in accordance with your values. They don't flatter your ego, they sharpen your mind. They don't follow your feelings, they follow your truth. And that's why true friendship is rare, because virtue is rare. You can't expect genuine connection from people still at war with themselves. You can't find depth with those who only swim in the shallow end of conversation. So yes, as your standards rise, your circle shrinks. But that smaller circle, when built on authenticity, becomes a fortress, a place where you can think freely, speak honestly, and rest without fear of judgment. Think of the people you trust the most. How many are there? 2, 3, maybe 1. That's not a weakness, that's wealth. Because real friendship isn't about having many, it's about having enough. Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." That's not a call to isolation, it's a call to depth. If you have even one person in your life who truly sees you, keep them close. Invest time, attention, and gratitude into that bond. Because the Stoics knew, quality relationships are not found. They are cultivated through mutual virtue. In the end, friendship, like peace, isn't measured by numbers, but by nourishment. The loudest groups often feel the emptiest. The smallest circles often hold the greatest peace. So, don't mourn the absence of crowds. Celebrate the presence of clarity. Because the moment you stop chasing quantity, you finally discover quality. The few who remain in your life, after all the noise fades, are not just friends. They're mirrors of your growth, companions in your solitude, and witnesses of your becoming. And when you reach that stage, you'll realize something profound. You were never losing friends. You were losing illusions. What's left is real, and that's all you'll ever need. Let's take a breath. If you've come this far, you've probably realized something. Having fewer friends isn't the problem you once thought it was. It's a sign that you've evolved. You've walked through 7 lessons, 7 quiet revolutions in how you see yourself and others. You learned that having fewer friends often means you've raised your standards, that you no longer entertain chaos disguised as connection. You discovered that being alone doesn't mean being empty. It means you've learned to build peace within yourself, not borrow it from others. You understood that every relationship has a cost, and that peace is too expensive to spend on those who drain it. You learned the power of authenticity, and how being genuine may cost you people, but never your soul. You realized that true maturity is protecting your inner calm. Even when the world demands a reaction, you recognized that validation is an illusion, and that self-respect is the only approval you'll ever need. And finally, you understood that quality matters more than quantity. That one genuine soul beside you is worth more than 100 empty names in your contact list. That's not loneliness. That's alignment. That's evolution. Stoicism has always taught that peace is not found in isolation or indulgence, but in integrity. When your outer world grows quieter, your inner world becomes louder. You start hearing your own thoughts more clearly. You start recognizing the person you've become, and for the first time, you stop apologizing for it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's not a poetic metaphor. It's a survival skill. Because in a world obsessed with noise, the ability to be content in silence is strength beyond measure. So if you ever find yourself wondering, why do I have so few friends? Remember this, you're not falling behind. You're stepping ahead. You're learning to choose peace over approval, clarity over comfort, depth over distraction. The people meant for you, the ones who share your calm, your integrity, your discipline, will find you, not through noise, but through stillness. Because peace recognizes peace. In the end, this journey isn't about losing friends. It's about losing the version of yourself that needed too many. And when you can finally sit in solitude, not as an escape, but as your natural state, that's when you've mastered the most stoic truth of all. You were never alone. You were just becoming whole. If this message spoke to you, if it made you see your solitude a little differently, then take a moment before you go. Pause, reflect, and ask yourself one question. Am I truly alone? Or finally at peace? Because maybe, just maybe, what you've been calling loneliness is actually the quiet sound of alignment. It's your soul telling you you've outgrown noise. And that realization, right there, is growth. If this episode helped you see that, if it reminded you that being calm, selective, and self-contained is a form of strength, then I'd be grateful if you'd like this video. Not for the numbers, but to help more people discover Stoicism in a world that desperately needs calm voices. And if you want to keep learning how to live with peace, purpose, and quiet strength, subscribe to StoicCraft. Every week, we explore timeless Stoic lessons that help you navigate modern chaos without losing yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. What's one moment where solitude taught you more than company ever could? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might just be the reminder someone else needs today. Until next time, stay grounded, stay disciplined, and remember, peace is not found in others. It's discovered within you.